The wine glass was halfway to my lips when my phone started vibrating against the dining room table. The sound cut through Dad's speech like a knife through silk, sharp, impossible to ignore, unwelcome. To family, he was saying, his voice carrying that familiar command presence even in his own living room. To the ones who serve with honor, who understand what sacrifice truly means, I glanced at the screen. Mark. Secure line. My husband never called during family dinners. Never interrupted the sacred ritual of my father's birthday celebration unless something had gone catastrophically wrong. My stomach dropped. And to legacy, Dad continued, raising his glass higher. The candlelight caught the military rings on his fingers, the ones he'd earned in places he still wouldn't name. To carrying forward what matters most. I stood, chair scraping too loudly against hardwood. "Excuse me," I murmured, already moving toward the kitchen. Behind me, I felt my mother's worried gaze, my sister's curious glance. My father's eyes stayed fixed on his wine glass, jaw tight with the particular disappointment he reserved for interruptions to his rituals. In the kitchen, I pressed the phone to my ear. "Mark, I'm at Dad's birthday, where are you exactly?" His voice was stripped down to pure urgency, the tone he used when missions went sideways. No preamble, no apology for the interruption, at the house. "Dad's place in Riverside. Take our daughter and leave. Right now." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. "What are you talking about? No time to explain. Get Sophia, get in the car, and drive. Don't tell anyone where you're going. Mark, you're scaring me." "Good. Be scared. And move." The line went dead. I stood in my father's kitchen, the one where I'd learned to iron uniforms at 8 years old, where I'd memorized military rank insignias before I could multiply, where every surface still gleamed with the kind of cleanliness that bordered on control. Family photos lined the walls, Dad in dress blues, Mom in her teacher's cardigan, me at my Naval Academy graduation. Everything looked so normal, so safe. But Mark's voice had carried the weight of something I'd been trained to recognize. Imminent danger. From the dining room, laughter erupted. My sister was telling some story, her voice bright and easy. Sophia's giggle rose above the rest, that pure, trusting sound only 6-year-olds can make. I moved back to the doorway and caught my mother's eye. "Everything okay, honey?" she asked, concern softening her features. "Yeah, the lie formed itself automatically. I need to grab something from the car. Sophia, sweetie, come help mommy real quick." My daughter looked up from her drawing, crayon poised mid-stroke. "But Grandpa's about to cut the cake. We'll be right back, baby." 2 minutes. My father set down his wine glass with careful precision. "Emily, the cake." "I know, Dad. I'm sorry. I just need to." I was already reaching for Sophia's hand, gently but firmly. "Come on, sweetheart. Bring your stuffed rabbit." Something in my tone must have translated, because Sophia gathered her toy without further protest. In the hallway, I grabbed both our coats with hands that had started trembling. "Emily?" My mother appeared behind me, voice dropping to the worried register I'd known all my life. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Mark needs me to check something." Another lie, smoother than the first. "We'll be back in a minute." But I was already opening the front door, already feeling the November cold bite at my face. Behind me, the warm glow of my father's house spilled out onto the porch, candles, laughter, the illusion of safety. Then I saw it. A black SUV parked 3 houses down. Engine running, exhaust ghosting white in the cold air. Windows tinted so dark they looked like voids. It hadn't been there when we arrived 2 hours ago. I knew every car on this street from childhood bike rides and teenage walks. This vehicle didn't belong. "Mommy, I'm cold," Sophia whispered. "I know, baby. Just get in the car, okay?" Quick like a bunny. I buckled her into the booster seat with fingers that fumbled the straps twice. My eyes kept flicking to the SUV. It hadn't moved, but its presence felt deliberate, patient. Waiting. I climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the wheel with both to steady them. In the rearview mirror, I watched the SUV's headlights flicker once, just a brief flash, like a signal. Or a confirmation. I pulled out of the driveway, heart hammering so loud I could barely hear Sophia asking where we were going. The warm house receded in my mirrors, my father's silhouette passing across the living room window, probably wondering why his disappointing daughter had walked out in the middle of his birthday toast. Again. Always letting him down. Always failing to understand what family meant. "Mommy?" Sophia's voice was small now, picking up on my tension. "Are we coming back?" I swallowed hard. "Sure, sweetie. We just need to go somewhere first." The lie tasted like ash. I drove faster than I should have through the quiet streets of Riverside, checking my mirrors every 3 seconds. The SUV hadn't followed, or if it had, it was better at surveillance than I was at counter-surveillance. Which meant professional, which meant Mark's panic had been justified. At the first red light, I pulled my phone from my pocket and tried calling him back. Straight to voicemail. I tried the secondary number he'd given me for emergencies. Same result. My mind raced through scenarios, trying to piece together what could have prompted this. Mark worked in military intelligence, had for the past decade. But his assignments were always classified, always compartmentalized. He brought home gym bags that smelled like gun oil and exhaustion that settled in his shoulders like permanent weight. He never brought home details, until tonight, when whatever he'd been carrying in silence had finally erupted. The light turned green. I pressed the gas, still heading south, away from my father's house. Away from the only home I'd known until I left for the Naval Academy at 18. "Mommy, you're driving scary," Sophia said, and I realized my knuckles were white on the wheel. "Sorry, baby. Mommy's just tired." I forced myself to slow down, to breathe, to think like the intelligence officer I'd once been before I'd taken the analyst position that let me sleep at home most nights. Before I'd traded operational work for the illusion of safety. 5 miles from my father's house, I pulled into a gas station and parked under the fluorescent lights. Not to refuel, to think. The overhead lights hummed, casting everything in that particular kind of artificial brightness that made the world feel unreal. I reached for the glove compartment, thinking maybe I'd left tissues there for Sophia's inevitable car snack messes. My hand closed around something that shouldn't have been there, a flash drive. Small, black, wrapped in a folded piece of paper. I pulled it out with hands that had gone numb. Unfolded the note. Mark's handwriting. Sharp, precise, the same block letters he used for classified reports. "If I can't reach you again, trust no one. Not even your father." The words swam in front of my eyes. I read them again, then a third time, as if repetition would make them make sense. "Not even your father, Colonel David Torres. 30 years Marine Corps, decorated veteran, community leader, the man who'd raised me on principles of honor, duty, country. The man whose approval I'd chased my entire life and never quite caught. The man whose disappointment had followed me like a shadow through every achievement, every promotion, every attempt to prove I understood what service meant. Trust no one. Not even your father, Mommy?" Sophia's voice pulled me back. "Can I have a snack?" I looked at my daughter in the rearview mirror, her small face illuminated by the passing headlights, rabbit clutched to her chest, trusting me completely to keep her safe. "Yeah, baby. Let's go get you something." I climbed out on shaking legs and walked her into the gas station, one hand on her shoulder, the other clutching my phone. Inside smelled like burnt coffee and industrial cleaner. A tired clerk nodded at us from behind bulletproof glass. I bought Sophia a juice box and crackers, paid cash without thinking about why cash felt important. We sat at a sticky table by the window while she ate, and I stared at my phone, willing Mark to call back. He didn't. Instead, at 8:47 p.m., my phone lit up with a news alert. "Breaking. Explosion reported at residence in Riverside. Emergency crews responding." My vision tunneled. The gas station spun. I clicked the article with hands that no longer felt attached to my body. Fairfax County Fire Department responded to reports of an explosion at approximately 8:35 p.m. at a residence on Elmwood Street in Riverside. The cause is under investigation. One person reportedly transported to hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. No other casualties reported at this time. Elmwood Street. My father's street. My father's house. The house I'd left 20 minutes ago, walking out in the middle of his birthday celebration because my husband had called with a warning I hadn't understood. "Mommy, you're squeezing too tight," Sophia said, and I realized I'd grabbed her hand. "Sorry, baby. Sorry." I loosened my grip but couldn't make myself let go. The clerk was watching us now, concern creasing his weathered face. "You okay, miss?" I nodded because my throat had closed around words. We walked back to the car. I buckled Sophia in, then sat in the driver's seat staring at nothing. My phone buzzed with incoming texts. My sister, my mother, numbers I didn't recognize. I couldn't make myself read them. All I could see was the warm glow of my father's house in my memory. The candles, the cake, the laughter, the explosion that had happened minutes after we left. If Mark hadn't called, if I hadn't listened, if I'd stayed for just one more toast, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. "Emily." A man's voice, familiar but strained. "It's Tom, your father's aide." "Tom, what happened? Don't come back." Don't go home. Don't answer calls from anyone claiming to be from the base. His words came fast, urgent. Just stay off grid until static cut him off. Then silence. I lowered the phone slowly. In the gas station parking lot, with my daughter humming softly in the back seat and a flash drive burning a hole in my pocket, I finally understood what Mark had been trying to tell me. We weren't safe. We'd never been safe. And whatever my father was involved in, knowingly or not, had just exploded into all our lives. I started the engine and pulled back onto the highway, heading south into the darkness, with no destination except away. Behind us, somewhere in Riverside, sirens wailed. To understand how I ended up driving south at midnight with a flash drive in my pocket and my father's house in flames behind me, you have to understand how I was raised. Control was love in the Torres household. Precision was affection. And disappointment was the air we breathed. I was 6 the first time Dad made me stand at attention. He'd just come back from a deployment I was too young to understand, his duffel bag still smelling like sand in places that turned parents into strangers. Before he'd even hugged Mom, before he'd put down his gear, he'd called me into the living room. Stand here, he'd said, positioning me on the center of the rug with gentle but firm hands on my shoulders. Heels together, back straight, chin level with the ground. I'd stood there for what felt like hours while he unpacked, while Mom made coffee in the kitchen with too bright chatter, while the afternoon sun moved across the floor and painted my shadow longer and longer. When he finally nodded his approval, I'd nearly collapsed with relief. Good, he'd said, and that single word had felt like being wrapped in warmth. Discipline starts early. You'll thank me when you're older. I was still waiting to feel grateful. Our house operated on military time and military precision. Breakfast at 0630. School bus at 0745. Homework completed before dinner at 1830, table set with geometric perfection, fork on left, knife and spoon on right, water glass at 2 o'clock. Bedtime at 2100, not a minute later, even when I had a book I couldn't put down or a friend sleeping over who thought rules were negotiable. They weren't. Not in Colonel Torres's house. Saturday mornings meant room inspection. Dad would walk through with a clipboard and a level eye, checking that my bed had hospital corners, that my shoes were lined up with toes exactly 2 inches from the wall, that there wasn't a single item out of place in my closet. The first time I failed, a wrinkle in my bedspread, barely visible, he'd stripped the entire bed and made me remake it 7 times. I was 9 years old. Mediocrity is a choice, he'd said, watching me struggle with sheets that seemed determined to betray me. You choose excellence or you choose failure. There's no middle ground. Mom fought a quieter war. She taught English at the community college and believed in other kinds of inheritance, poetry tucked into lunch bags, whispered encouragement before tests, books left on my pillow with certain passages underlined. Your father, she'd said once when I was 12 and crying over a math test I'd gotten a 94 on, not good enough, never good enough. Your father believes love is discipline. He doesn't understand that sometimes it's just witnessing. I hadn't understood what she meant then. I did now, driving through the darkness with my daughter asleep in the back seat and my childhood unraveling in the rearview mirror. By the time I was 14, I'd learned that my father's disappointment had specific triggers. Crying was weakness. Questions about his deployments were intrusive. Any interest in military service that didn't exactly match his vision was naive fantasy. When I brought home a flyer about the Naval Academy's summer seminar program, he'd looked at it for a long time. Long enough that hope had started building in my chest, dangerous, fragile hope that maybe this time, maybe finally, I'd found the thing that would make him proud. You're not strong enough, he'd said, handing it back. The academy is for warriors, Emily. Not girls playing dress up in uniforms. But I'm top of my class. I run a 6-minute mile. No. The word had the finality of a door slamming. You'll go to your mother's college. Study something practical, teaching maybe, or nursing. Something that suits your constitution. Constitution. As if my gender was a medical condition to be accommodated. I'd nodded, folded the flyer, and later that night, alone in my room, I'd applied anyway. Used Mom's college email. Forged his signature on the recommendation form. It was the first truly disobedient thing I'd ever done. The acceptance letter came in April of my senior year. Thin envelope first, then the thick one 6 weeks later. We are pleased to offer. I'd stood in the driveway holding it, feeling the weight of my future pressing against my ribs like something trying to break free. I'd walked straight into his study. No knocking, no preamble. I got in, I'd said, holding out the envelope. He'd looked up from his expense reports. He kept the family finances with the same precision he'd kept his platoons. Read the first paragraph. You applied without permission. You would have said no. I'm saying no now. I'm 18 in 2 months. You can't stop me. Something had flickered across his face then, surprise that I'd learned to hold my ground, or disappointment that I'd chosen this particular ground to hold. You'll fail, he'd said. Not cruel, just factual. You'll wash out in the first semester and come home humiliated. And I won't say I told you so, but we'll both know. Then I'll fail on my own terms. He'd handed the letter back. If you walk out that door to chase this fantasy, don't expect to walk back in when reality hits you. I'd looked at my father, this man who'd taught me to stand straight, to endure, to never show weakness, and realized with sudden, terrible clarity that he'd only ever taught me how to be a good soldier. Never how to be his daughter. Understood, sir, I'd said, and left the study. That had been 20 years ago. Now, sitting in a motel room 2 states away with Sophia finally asleep and a flash drive glowing like accusation on the nightstand, I wondered if I'd ever really left that study at all. The drive had taken 6 hours. I'd stopped twice, once at a rest stop for Sophia to use the bathroom, once at an all-night diner when my hands had been shaking too badly to keep driving. Each time, I'd checked the parking lot for black SUVs, for faces that watched too long, for any sign that Mark's paranoia had been justified. I'd found nothing, which somehow felt worse than finding something. The motel was the kind of place that asked no questions and expected cash. The clerk had barely looked up from her crossword when I'd slid 3 20s across the counter. Just the one night? She'd asked, fingers already moving to pull a key from the pegboard. Maybe 2. I'll let you know. She'd nodded like she'd heard that before, like she understood that some people paid by the night because planning further ahead felt like tempting fate. In the room, I'd locked the door twice, pushed a chair against it for good measure, and sat on the edge of the bed watching Sophia sleep. Her rabbit was tucked under one arm, her other hand curled near her face in that completely trusting way children sleep. My phone had finally stopped buzzing with messages and calls. I'd turned it off around 2 a.m., unable to face my sister's frantic texts or my mother's increasingly worried voicemails. One message I had read, though. From a number I didn't recognize, your father is alive. In hospital. Don't come. Don't call. They're watching. No signature. No context. Just those 3 sentences that raised more questions than they answered. Now it was 4 a.m., and I was staring at the flash drive like it might suddenly sprout legs and explain itself. I reached for my laptop, the one I'd grabbed from my apartment during a 30-second stop while Sophia waited in the running car. My hands hovered over the keyboard. This was the line Mark had drawn in that note. Once I opened whatever was on this drive, there would be no unknowing it. No going back to birthday dinners and the pretense that everything was normal. But normal had exploded 12 hours ago. I plugged in the drive. For a long moment, nothing happened. Just an empty folder icon on my desktop, innocent and blank. Then, slowly, files began to appear. One after another, materializing like ghosts coming into focus. The first was labeled read_first.txt. I double-clicked. Emily, if you're reading this, I didn't make it back. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for dragging you into this. But you need to know the truth. Your father's consulting company, Torres Strategic Advisors, has been used as a front for transferring classified defense technology to private buyers. I don't think he knows the full scope. He's being used by people he trusts. But the money trail leads directly through his accounts. I've spent 6 months building the case. 3 days ago, my cover was burned. Someone inside the agency sold me out. I tried to get you and Sophia to safety before they came for me, but I'm running out of time. The evidence is all here. Financial records, communications, transfer documents. Take it to internal affairs. Ask for Agent Rachel Torres, no relation, I checked. She's clean. She'll know what to do with it. I love you. I love our daughter. I'm sorry I couldn't say goodbye. The cursor blinked at the end of the message. Waiting. I sat there for a long time, not moving, barely breathing. My father. A front for weapons trafficking. It was impossible. It had to be impossible. Colonel David Torres had spent 30 years in the Marine Corps. He'd bled for this country. He'd lost friends, carried guilt, woken up at 3 a.m. with nightmares he'd never explained. He coached Little League and volunteered at the VFW and stood for the national anthem even when it played on television commercials. He wasn't capable of treason. Was he? I opened the next file. A spreadsheet, rows and columns of numbers that meant nothing to me at first. Then I saw the headers: date, amount, account origin, account destination, item description. I scrolled down. $2.3 million. Torres Strategic Advisors to Laurel Group LLC. Advanced Targeting System Specifications. $1.8 million. Torres Strategic Advisors to Tidewater Maritime. Encrypted Communications Protocols. $4.1 million. Torres Strategic Advisors to Everson Consulting. Classified Satellite Imagery Processing Software. On and on. Dozens of transactions. Millions of dollars. My father's company, his name, his accounts. I clicked on the next folder. Photographs. The first showed my father shaking hands with a man in an expensive suit at what looked like a marina. Norfolk, based on the ships in the background. The man's face was partially obscured by sunglasses, but his posture read money and power. The second photo showed the same man getting into a black sedan. A younger woman stood nearby, her face toward the camera, sharp features, calculating eyes. The third photo made my stomach drop. It was me, taken at a county fair 3 months ago. I was holding Sophia's hand, laughing at something off camera. A red circle had been drawn around both our faces. Targeted. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set the laptop down. Someone had been watching us. Someone had marked us. Someone had decided we were loose ends or leverage or collateral damage. And Mark had seen it coming. I looked at Sophia, still sleeping peacefully, and felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest. This wasn't about my father's disappointment anymore. This wasn't about decades of trying to earn approval I'd never receive. This was about survival. And if Mark's evidence was real, if my father really had been used as a front for something this big, then whoever was behind it wouldn't stop at one explosion. They'd come for anyone who knew too much. Anyone who could expose them. Anyone like the wife of the military intelligence officer who'd been building a case against them. I stood up, moved to the window, parted the curtain just enough to see the parking lot. Dawn was starting to break, painting everything in shades of gray and exhausted blue. A car pulled into the lot, just a tired businessman in a Toyota, nothing suspicious. But I watched him anyway, cataloging his movements, his posture, whether he looked at our room. He didn't. He just climbed out, stretched, and shuffled toward his own room like a man who'd driven too far and slept too little. Normal. Everything looked so goddamn normal. I let the curtain fall and turned back to the laptop. If I was going to do this, if I was going to take on whoever had turned my father into an unwitting accomplice and my husband into a target, I needed to understand everything. I opened the next file. Audio recording. Timestamp. 3 weeks ago. I plugged in my headphones so Sophia wouldn't wake, and pressed play. Static at first. Then voices. Male, professional, speaking in that careful way people do when they know they're being recorded but don't know who's listening. The Torres pipeline is clean. Hensley's getting too close, but we've got options. What kind of options? The permanent kind. Make it look accidental. Gas leak, car crash, something the locals will buy. A pause. Then. And the family? Collateral if necessary. The daughter's Navy intelligence, she knows how to ask questions. The kid's just insurance. My blood turned to ice. They were talking about us. About making Mark's death look accidental. About using Sophia as leverage. The recording continued, but I could barely hear it over the rushing in my ears. These weren't foreign agents or terrorist cells. These were Americans. People who spoke with bureaucratic efficiency about murder. People who saw a 6-year-old girl as just insurance. I pulled off the headphones and sat in the dark motel room, watching the sky lighten outside, and understood with perfect clarity what Mark had been trying to save us from. Not my father. The people using him. And now they thought we knew too much. By 6 a.m., I had a plan. It wasn't a good plan. It wasn't even a particularly smart plan. But it was all I had. I would drive to Washington. I would find this agent Rachel Torres that Mark had mentioned. I would hand over the evidence and let people whose job it was to handle conspiracies and treason do exactly that. Then Sophia and I would disappear. New names, new city, new life. I'd done it before, moved across the country for the Naval Academy, reinvented myself as someone my father couldn't disappoint. I could do it again. I was packing our few belongings when my phone, still powered off, suddenly buzzed. No, not buzzed. Someone was calling the burner phone I kept in the bottom of my bag. The one only 3 people knew the number to. Mark, my mother, and my former commanding officer from my intelligence days. I pulled it out with hands that had gone numb. Unknown number. I answered without breathing. Hello? Emily Torres? A woman's voice. Professional, controlled, carrying an edge of urgency. Who is this? Agent Rachel Torres. Internal Affairs. Your husband contacted me 2 days ago. I've been trying to reach you. My grip tightened on the phone. How did you get this number? Mark gave it to me. As insurance. A pause. Mrs. Torres, I need you to listen very carefully. Your husband is alive, but he's in protective custody. The people he was investigating have active surveillance on your family. They know you left Riverside. They're looking for you. My father is safe. In hospital under guard. He's not a target anymore. You are. The room spun. Why me? Because you have the evidence. And because they think killing you sends a message to anyone else who might talk. I looked at Sophia, still sleeping, rabbit tucked under her chin. What do I do? My voice came out smaller than I wanted. Come in. Let us protect you. We have a safe house. No. The word came out before I could think it through. I'm not putting my daughter in a safe house while we wait for this to blow over. Give me another option. Silence on the other end. Then, there's a veterans reunion in Riverside next week. Your father's supposed to speak. A lot of military brass will be there, officers, enlisted, press. Very public. Very visible. So if you show up with the evidence, if you make it public in front of witnesses they can't silence, they lose their leverage. They can't make you disappear if everyone's watching. I processed this. You want me to go back to Riverside? Where they just tried to kill my father. I want you to go where they won't expect you. Where you'll have protection by visibility. Her voice softened slightly. Your father still doesn't know the truth about his company. But some of the people he trusts, the ones using him, will be at that reunion. If we're going to cut the head off this operation, we need to do it where they feel safe enough to show their faces. My mind raced. And Mark? Will be there, undercover. You won't see him until it's over, but he'll be watching. Why should I trust you? Because your husband did. And because right now, I'm the only person offering you a way out that doesn't involve running for the rest of your life. I looked at the laptop, at the evidence glowing in neat rows of data and damning photographs. If I do this, I said slowly, if I come back and make this public, my father will know everything. His company, his reputation, his friends. Will all be exposed as either conspirators or dupes. Yes, he'll never forgive me. Maybe not, Agent Torres said quietly. But you'll all be alive to have that conversation. I closed my eyes. 20 years ago, I'd walked out of my father's study choosing my own path over his approval. I was about to do it again. When's the reunion? I asked. Saturday. 4 days from now. I'll text you the details in a secure contact protocol. Don't use your regular phone. Don't contact anyone from your previous life. Just you, your daughter, and the evidence. And then what? Then we end this. One way or another. The line went dead. I sat in the gray morning light of a cheap motel room, my daughter sleeping peacefully behind me, and tried to remember what it felt like to be someone who believed the world made sense. That person seemed very far away now. Saturday. 4 days. 4 days to keep my daughter safe. 4 days to figure out how to destroy my father's life to save it. 4 days to decide if the approval I'd chased my whole life had ever been worth chasing at all. Outside, the sun finally broke over the horizon, painting everything gold. It should have felt like hope. It just felt like countdown. The drive back to Riverside took 3 days. Not because of distance, it was only 6 hours, but because I couldn't bring myself to go straight there. Instead, Sophia and I zigzagged across state lines, stopping at roadside motels and chain restaurants where the breakfast buffets smelled like industrial eggs and old coffee. I paid cash everywhere, used a fake name at every check-in, threw away my credit cards at a rest stop in Pennsylvania and bought a prepaid phone at a Walmart in Maryland. Sophia thought it was an adventure. Like we're spies, Mommy, she'd say, drawing elaborate maps on restaurant placemats showing all our secret locations. I smiled and played along, because the alternative was explaining that we actually were hiding. That the people who'd tried to kill her grandfather might be looking for us. That her father was alive but unreachable, protected by people who dealt in classified silences. That her mother was about to walk into a room full of veterans and blow apart everything her grandfather had built. On Wednesday night, we stayed in a motel outside Richmond. While Sophia watched cartoons, I opened the laptop one more time and went through Mark's evidence methodically. Financial records, 47 suspicious transactions over 18 months. Communications, encrypted emails between Torres strategic advisors and 5 shell companies. Photographs, my father with known defense contractors, some flagged by government watch lists. Audio recordings, conversations Mark had captured discussing the Torres pipeline, like it was a proven asset. And the kill order, the one where men in suits discussed making Mark's death look accidental and treating my daughter as insurance. I'd listened to that recording so many times I could recite it. Not because I wanted to, because I needed to remember why I was doing this. Why I was about to ruin my father's reputation to save our lives. The prepaid phone buzzed. A text from Agent Torres's secure line. Saturday, 2 p.m. Riverside Community Center. Your father speaks at 2:30. Arrive early. Look for the man in the Navy SEAL dress uniform. He's one of ours. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Will Mark be there? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Yes, but he can't acknowledge you until it's done. For your safety and his. My throat tightened. I hadn't seen my husband in over a week. Didn't know if he was injured, scared, holding up under the weight of protective custody. Didn't know if he blamed me for not seeing the danger sooner. Understood, I typed back. Then, because I needed to hear it, is my father really innocent? The response came immediately. He was used, manipulated, but yes, he didn't know what his company was being used for. The people he trusted exploited that trust. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt the particular hollow ache of understanding that my father, the man who'd spent my entire childhood teaching me about honor and duty and seeing through deception, had been blind to betrayal happening under his own roof. Because the people betraying him spoke his language, wore his uniform, shared his codes, because he'd trusted them the way he'd never quite trusted me. I thought it was an attack on my father. I thought someone was trying to kill him. I held up the flash drive. But my husband had been investigating something else. He'd been building a case against a conspiracy to sell classified defense technology through a front company. That company was Torres Strategic Advisors. My father stepped back like I'd slapped him. Emily, what are you? You didn't know, Dad. I turned to him, and I could feel tears starting, hot and unwanted. You were being used. The people you trusted. Cal Whitaker moved then, fast for a man his age, stepping forward with his hands out in a placating gesture. David, your daughter is obviously confused. She's been through trauma. Her husband has been filling her head with lies. I have proof, I said loudly. Financial records, communications, photographs. Evidence of 47 illegal transactions over 18 months. Evidence that your consultancy was used to legitimize the sale of classified military technology to private buyers. The room erupted. People standing, shouting questions, reaching for phones. And I have proof, I continued, raising my voice over the chaos, that when my husband got close to exposing it, someone ordered his death. Made it look like an accident. Used my daughter as leverage. I locked eyes with Cal Whitaker. I have recordings of you discussing it, Mr. Whitaker. You and Colonel Fletcher and Colonel Rains. All of you, planning to kill a military intelligence officer to cover up your treason. Fletcher and Rains were on their feet now, faces flushed, both talking at once. Agent Torres appeared at the side door, badge held high. FBI, nobody move. More agents poured in, 4, 6, 8 of them, moving with practiced efficiency to surround Whitaker and the two colonels. This is ridiculous, Whitaker said, but his voice had lost its warmth. David, you know me. You know I would never. You used him, I said, and now I was crying, couldn't stop crying. You used his company, his reputation, his trust. You turned him into an accessory to treason, and you did it by pretending to be his friend. My father looked between us, me, Whitaker, the FBI agents moving in. Cal? His voice was small, uncertain, nothing like the commanding officer who'd dominated my childhood. Tell me she's wrong. Tell me this is some kind of mistake. Whitaker's mask finally slipped. You were always so goddamn naive, David. All that honor, all that principle, you never understood how the real world works. How much money there is in defense technology if you know how to move it. How easy it is to hide transfers in a veterans consultancy because nobody wants to audit a war hero. You son of a bitch, my father breathed. Whitaker smiled, cold and sharp. I made you rich, David. Your consultancy made millions. You think that was all legitimate contracts? You think. An FBI agent cut him off, pulling his arms behind his back. Calvin Whitaker, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit espionage, trafficking in classified materials, and conspiracy to commit murder. The handcuffs clicked. Fletcher and Rains went next, both of them shouting about lawyers and political persecution and mistakes. The room was pandemonium now. Veterans shouting, families pulling out phones, someone crying in the back row. And my father stood in the middle of it all, staring at his best friend being led away in handcuffs, and he looked more lost than I'd ever seen him. Dad, I said softly. He turned to me, and his eyes were wet. You were right, he whispered. About joining the Navy. About being strong enough. About everything. His voice cracked. I should have trusted you. Then he did something he'd never done in my entire adult life. He pulled me into a hug. And for the first time since I was 6 years old, standing at attention in his living room, trying so hard to be good enough, I felt like maybe I was. The room was still chaos around us. Agents moving, people shouting, someone had started filming. But in that moment, it was just me and my father, and 38 years of disappointment finally cracking open to show something that might, eventually, look like forgiveness. "I'm sorry," he said into my hair. "God, Emily, I'm so sorry." "I know, Dad, I know." A voice behind me, familiar and beloved. I turned. Mark stood there, one arm still in a sling, beard grown out, eyes tired but alive. So alive. "Mark." I ran to him and he caught me with his good arm, and we held each other while the FBI arrested traitors and my father watched his world reshape itself. In Riverside, Virginia learned that sometimes the biggest betrayals come from the people who know exactly which words to say to make you trust them. "It's over," Mark whispered into my hair. "It's finally over." I wanted to believe him. But I'd been in intelligence long enough to know that over was always temporary. That men like Whitaker had networks, had lawyers, had ways of turning even arrests into bargaining chips. Still, for now, for this moment, it felt like victory. Agent Torres appeared at my elbow. "Mrs. Hensley, we need your statement. And the original flash drive." I pulled back from Mark and handed her both items. "There's audio on there, of Whitaker ordering the hit on Mark. Using my daughter as leverage." "I know. We've already heard it." She glanced at my father, who was sitting in the front row now, head in his hands. "Your father's clean. We've verified every transaction. He signed paperwork, but he genuinely believed it was legitimate defense contracting. Whitaker forged specifications, altered contracts, made everything look routine. So he's not going to be charged?" "No, but his reputation." She trailed off, the implications clear. My father's name would be in every headline. His consultancy, his judgment, his failure to see what was happening under his own roof, all of it exposed. He'd wanted legacy. Now he'd have notoriety. "Can I talk to him?" I asked. Agent Torres nodded. "We'll need formal statements from both of you soon, but you have a few minutes." I walked over to where my father sat. Mark stayed back, giving us space. "Dad?" He looked up, and he'd aged a decade in the last 10 minutes. "How did I not see it?" he asked. "Cal and I served together. He was at your mother's funeral. He's been in my home hundreds of times. How did I not know?" I sat down beside him. "Because he spoke your language. He knew exactly what you wanted to hear. He used your honor against you." I was a fool. "You were human." I took his hand, that hand that had pushed my shoulders back when I was 6, that had handed back my Naval Academy acceptance letter with disappointment, that was trembling now with the weight of betrayal. "And for what it's worth, you raised me to see it. Everything you taught me about discipline, about questioning assumptions, about not taking things at face value. That's what made me look at Mark's evidence and believe it. So in a weird way, you stopped this." He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "Is that supposed to make me feel better? I don't know, does it?" He squeezed my hand. "Not yet, but maybe someday." We sat there while FBI agents finished taking people into custody, while my mother appeared from somewhere and wrapped both of us in a hug that smelled like her lavender perfume and felt like coming home. "Where's Sophia?" Mom asked, wiping her eyes. "Safe. In a playroom. I should go get her." But before I could stand, a commotion at the side door made everyone turn. Lieutenant Commander Beck was there, holding Sophia's hand. She saw me and ran, rabbit bouncing behind her. "Mommy, the lady said I could have 3 juice boxes." I caught her and held her close, breathing in her strawberry shampoo and kid sweat in relief. "And look." She pulled back, beaming. "Daddy's here." Mark knelt down, awkward with the sling, and Sophia launched herself at him. He caught her one-armed and buried his face in her hair. "Hey, ladybug," he said, voice thick. "I missed you so much. You smell funny." "Yeah, I've been eating bad hospital food." "Are you sick?" "Not anymore. Not now that I found you and Mommy." I looked at my family, my husband, my daughter, my parents, all of us battered and bruised but intact. And I looked at the community center, at the veterans who'd stayed to witness everything, at the agents still working the scene. This was what truth looked like. Messy, painful, public, but real, finally real.